What up, Cavs Nation? I'm your host, Ethan Sands, and I'm back with another episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. And tonight, as we are recording at 1:30 in the morning after the Cavs took down the Golden State Warriors once again, 113-95 on Monday night. And I have a special guest for today's episode. My guy, Spencer Davies, Cavs on SI. He's someone that's been covering the team for over a decade, an NBA national reporter, and he does a great job. Spencer, your first time on the pod. Welcome. How are you doing, my friend?
Feeling blessed, a little bit tired because it is 1:30 a.m., but I'm ready to roll. New Year's tomorrow, so, not too bad.
Just getting ready for the new year, man. Got to get ready for all the good stuff coming up in 2025. And somebody and some team might not be bringing it in any better than the Cleveland Cavaliers. Yes, they are on this daunting West Coast trip, but they're undefeated against teams from the out west. Spence, this game was ugly from the beginning, and this team came back roaring. And to me, it felt like the first half, and especially that second quarter, where the Cavs only scored 20 points and the Golden State Warriors only scored 11, that the law of averages from this Cavs team, at least, from what they've been able to accomplish this season, would even itself out. And so it did. They were able to put up 30 or more points in both the third and fourth quarter with a roaring 37-point third quarter. Spence, what did you see that you thought was the biggest change in the second half for this Cavs team?
Well, you look down and then you look up and Donovan Mitchell hits 3 straight. That probably helps out a little bit. I think they hit 5 straight threes to open up the third. It was Don's 3. Evan hit one at the top of the perimeter, and then Dean Wade on a catch shoot. So knocking down your shots obviously helps. But for me, I just think that second quarter was so egregiously bad for both sides. And I didn't know that either team was going to combine for 25 total. And the fact that they scored 20 and somehow outscored Golden State by 9 was kind of a telltale sign that, usually the law of averages, like you said, do even out. So, the third, they just kind of were making their shots. Their pace was up. Their defensive activity was outstanding. I think you always have to show a lot of love to Dean Wade, whether he's a big ball 3, a stretch 4, or a small ball 5. This guy's been so impactful on the team, just with his work on the glass, the job that he does defensively. But you also have to show a lot of love to guys like Darius Garland too on the switches, and even you look at, this was before the bad second quarter, but in the first quarter, Cavs don't really have too much going for them. Kenny Atkinson puts in Karis LeVert. I think it took about 2 seconds before that guy got a steal. George Niang does yeoman's work on that end of the floor too, against certain matchups. I thought Sam Merrill did a good job. I thought Max Strus did a good job staying in front, despite him, being off on his timing a little bit with some passes and whatnot. So no, that would be how I would put it.
Yeah, 100%. And I think you're absolutely right. And obviously, we want to touch on Dean Wade and what he's been able to accomplish as the starting small forward, a role that he hadn't been in a lot coming into the season. And we talk about going all the way back to the beginning of the season when Isaac Okoro, Max Strus were both on the injured list. And the team had to go to Dean Wade. And they were like, well, this is a lineup. Again, something that they used to do under JB Bickerstaff with 3 bigs, 3 players, 6'9.5" or above, in Dean Wade, Jared Allen, Evan Mobley. And then you talk about what he's been able to do on the perimeter, especially tonight against Stephen Curry, especially tonight against guys like Dennis Schroeder. There was multiple different matchups that we'd like to see, and you talked about it. The switchability of this team has allowed them to be so much better on the defensive end in this latter half of the season for them, right? We talk about in the beginning portion of the year, there were questions about the defense. There were questions about how they were allowing other teams to score the basketball. But against their last, I think, 15 teams, they're in the top 5 in defensive rating. And I think it's a great testament to how this team has adjusted, has evolved, and how they continue to show that it is not about how they start, but it's how they finish. And I've said this earlier into the season to you off the podcast. This is a team that starts hot, finishes hot. And even in the middle, they've been trying to figure things out. So for me to see them come out and score 37 points after scoring just 46 in the first half, it showed a lot about how they were able to maneuver and make changes and adjustments in the game in halftime. And that's something that we all wanted to see when Kenny Atkinson was brought into this team and this organization, especially after the success that JB Bickerstaff had, but also the flaws that he has in his game. So then we talk about what Donovan Mitchell does, um, and the MVP conversation that it feels like he's still not really in. And Spence, you mentioned it. Being able to roar in 15 points, 5 threes in the third quarter, that kept this team not only alive, but it pushed them forward. Something that this Cavs team is used to. 15 of his 23 points coming in the third quarter. It allowed them to have a much larger lead and comfortability going into the fourth quarter. What have you thought about Donovan's ability not only to sense the moment this season, but also to take a step back when necessary to elevate everybody around him?
He's finding the balance, man. Kenny always calls him the Evan Whisperer. He's always getting his teammates involved. I mean, he saw that DG was taking his man off the dribble and playing him like a fiddle today, the way he was able to get into the paint, find JA, spray out to shooters, utilize the floater, utilize his three-point game. Donovan, though, he, like you said, he knows when it's time to take over and if things are going a little bit mucky. And he was able to just I mean, some of these were very tough shots, so I want to say like they're just like well-generated ones that we're used to seeing. But Donovan's just one of those guys that he can take those because he's been in that moment before. He knows when it's time and when separation needs to be created. But the biggest thing above all in the third quarter for me was just that the Cavs just stuck to their habits, even though it was just a very slow, ugly paced stoppage time all over the place in the second quarter. They still stuck to their guns. They stuck to their habits that they continue to talk about and just trusted in the work and trusted in the process. And they came out just blazing from deep. And you could say the same shots from the first half, but it's something that they've been able to repeat. And they're not tired of repetition, which is something that stuck out to me when he talked about that the last game at home, was just like they can't get bored of the execution just because things are going so well. And, even when they're not going well, you have to just continue doing what you know works. Don't stray away from it. And I haven't seen the Cavs just go back to any of their bad habits much at all this season. And there's not been too much of the one-on-one or high pick and roll, and that's it. There's subsets and actions. There's cutters. There was a beautiful give and go between George Niang and Sam Merrill today that just brought a smile to my face, just looking at the fundamentals of that. I even look at, you were talking about the defense earlier and the switchability. I thought when one of the bigs, they switched out onto a guard up top against the Warriors, and there was a drive, and Trace Jackson Davis, I believe it was, on the baseline. Sam Merrill just showed a body, and TJD missed the layup. And the Warriors did miss some bunnies tonight, but just knowing that there's a body there is just very, very distracting to a team that's trying to get out of an offensive funk that the Cavs had them in. And it just feels like the Warriors got shell-shocked by the Cavs Cavalanche, as Cavs Twitter likes to call it. But yeah, there's just so many things that you can look at and be positive from. But there are, obviously the things you look at in the second quarter, and a few mistiming things, a few passes that were not on the mark in the open floor. It got a little bit sloppy, but for the most part, you look at the fast break opportunities and the decisions they've been making and how quickly they've gotten into their offense. It's a tough team.
It's a very tough team to keep up with, and it's a very tough team, especially when we talked about it earlier. The law of averages shows that even if they have a bad half, they're going to be able to come back and show a little bit signs of life, even if it's not to the same level as what they've shown all season. And that's what it was tonight. The Cavs in the first half, 18 for 46, 39% from the field, 6 of 23, 26% from three. The Cavs in the second half, 26 for 50, 52%, 12 of 24, 50% from three. And the turnover comparison, 11 turnovers in the first half to just 5 in the second. And then also, as we mentioned, Donovan Mitchell being Donovan Mitchell, that was just the third time in his NBA career with 5 or more 3-pointers in a single quarter. So again, sensing the moment, being able to take a step forward, even when guys like Darius Garland, Dean Wade, even Ty Jerome, who kept the Cavs alive in that second quarter, were huge. But Donovan said, hey, we're needing to get a bigger lead. I'm going to step into the spotlight like I can and like I do and do that. So when you talk about guys like Ty Jerome, who he knows very well, and also talk about the minute allocation that has been given out this season and how that is differentiated, especially with Max Strus returning, then to see Ty Jerome come in to the second quarter that was, as Spence perfectly described, mucky. Just so interesting to think about how poorly both of these teams shot. I think they had 13 straight possessions where neither team made a bucket. So then for Ty Jerome to step into the game and be, as the team called him in earlier into the season, the microwave. He had 8 points. I think it was 2 of the 3 field goals that the Cavs had made in like the first 7 minutes of that second quarter came from Ty Jerome. Both triples, by the way, allowing the Cavs to not only get back into the ball game, but to take a lead. And then you talk about the smaller guys, right? The smaller guys in this rotation that have played huge minutes. And I know exactly the play that you're talking about when Sam Merrill walled up and then got rewarded by Ty Jerome on the other end. And he had to talk to him a little bit afterwards, giving him a point before Steve Kerr and the Golden State Warriors called a timeout, discussing how he almost missed him in the corner wide open. So when you talk about how this team has been able to operate this season and what they've been able to do on both ends of the ball, it feels like there's been so much conversation about before the season about what pairings are going to work. Darius and Donovan, Evan Mobley, Jared Allen. Tonight, it was clear. Darius and Donovan combined for 48 points and 12 assists, while Darius had 2 steals, and as we mentioned, Donovan Mitchell had 5 triples. So, Spence, what do you think about this pairing and all the noise that came into the season about how this pairing might not be able to work? Darius might be on the trading block, and now 28-4, and what this team has been able to accomplish.
It's like I said on our Cavs on SI podcast earlier today, man. It's just Kenny mixing up the potions in the lab. It's just he's finding ways to get them to work together, and a lot of it has to do with how they're playing off ball and how they're getting to the corners and how they're able to play make off the catch. They're doing so many different things. They're not just always handling. They're moving. They're constantly moving. Everyone's constantly in motion, and everyone's getting a touch. And if it's not working for one guy one night, maybe he's the shooter and the other is the playmaker, and then vice versa. Like there's no like defined role for each of them, I think, right now. And I mean, you can look at Darius being more the traditional point guard, which he is. Like I said, he had some really nice feeds to Jared Allen and spraying out to the perimeter. I mean, his change of space and his shiftiness, the way he can just get guys off balance, just close when guys are closing out to him on the 3-point line, and he just makes a couple dribbles and then, plays off 2 feet, does a little spin move. He's got so many things in his arsenal. He had a give and go with someone where he looked like he was going out of bounds, caught it, and then had a little like 2-handed floater that looked like it was one of the weirdest looking shots I saw, but it was just nothing but net. And I was like, holy crap, he is just engaged today. He was all sorts of you could tell that he this one meant a lot to him. He was going into bodies and ones, screaming. This is the kind of like physicality I think that he's wanting to show this entire season. That yeah, he might be small in height, but maybe not in stature, and maybe definitely not in heart. I think that DG's taken it upon himself to really do that, but at the same time, consistently getting up the threes and quick in the shot clocks when they're good looks. Because as we've noted last year, DG is one of the best catch shooters in the NBA. He was last year. They didn't nearly get him enough looks out there before. And, a lot of people were thinking, okay, the wing's got to be the one that has to be the catch shooter. No, it's the guards are doing the catch shooting and the pull-up shooting and a lot of shooting in general because Evan Mobley's been handling the ball. As we know, Evan was in foul trouble tonight. Jared Allen was in foul trouble tonight, and George was as well. But they just found a way to make it work just by, with Darius and Donovan in particular, just shooting and playmaking. And it's the whole bag. And you also see it on the defensive end, like you said, too.
Yeah, and I think that was what all the fans wanted to see the most of, which was the defensive end, especially after the game against the Nuggets, where it was a high scoring affair. And people
Mm-hmm.
were like, well, where's the defense? This is the NBA that we're talking about nowadays, that the ratings are going down, all these different things
Don't get me
where
started.
hey, and people are asking for three balls, people are asking for scoring, but they also want to see the old school style of ball. And I feel like JB Bickerstaff will be proud of this team's efforts tonight, where they allowed under 100 points. And it's been a occurrence that is not just once this season, it's happened multiple times throughout the year. And they've shown that they are capable of doing so, and especially against a high powered offense like the Golden State Warriors. It's another aspect of the Cavs showing that they can win in multiple different ways and everybody can step up. And just going back to the Dean Wade element, 10 points, 13 rebounds, a career high for him, third double double of his NBA career. And then you telling me that he is also the leader for tonight's game in rebounds for the Cavs, who have Evan Mobley and Jared Allen, who are more known as rebounders. And that doesn't even talk about what he did on the defensive end when he's talking about switching and all these other things. I mean, the Warriors shot 33% tonight, their worst field goal percentage in a home game under Steve Kerr in his entire tenure, right? So you talk about what this team is doing on both ends of the ball, shooting, defense, everything you want to talk about the basketball game. You've covered this team a long time, Spence, and I don't want to put you on the spot.
Oh,
But
God, here we go.
how great is this team in comparison to some of the others that you've seen? And when it comes to the rivalry of the Warriors Cavs series, I know this is just the second game, is only two games that they get to play before the playoffs. But what does this mean to you to see this transpiring after so many years where it didn't seem as competitive?
Just between the Cavs and the Warriors talking about?
Both the Cavs and the Warriors, and also just the Cavs franchise itself.
Well, the Cavs and Warriors thing, I just feel like it's some medicine that they are feeding to them that they used to give them. And I was tweeting about it all night. I was like, this has to be demoralizing. It's like looking yourself in the mirror about 8 years ago. Like, it's crazy just how fast, when you just look down and all of a sudden there's 12 points on the board in a matter of 2 minutes. Like, that has to be so hard for a team. And I think it broke the Warriors tonight. I think that's what happened. And Kenny even said that in the press conference, was like, I think we wore them down. And you do that with depth as well, but just that in particular, I feel like with that run really took control of the game. But in terms of the Cavs, I've been asked this one recently. I think it's hard to put them on any kind of level with the LeBron teams because they're just different. They're differently run. They're differently personality wise, they're different. And the Cavs proved it. They won a championship and they went to 4 straight. So I don't want to quite go there yet, but I will say, like, as far as the talent goes, I think collectively this is as deep of a Cavs team as I've ever seen. This is as happy and connected as a locker room as I've ever seen. I'll put their locker room mood a little bit higher than the Cavs locker room. It's just different, right? You had some funny personalities and stuff in the LeBron era, but there was always a kind of a sense of pressure because you're playing with the best player in the world. It's really tough, especially for new guys that came in on trades. This one, it's a returning group. They know who they're playing for. They know who they're sacrificing for, and they want to cover for the next man, and they want to buy in for the next man. It's all sacrifice. There's literally no egos in the locker room, which is hard to come by when you have 3 potential all-stars. That is hard. And they all treat each other the same, and they genuinely love each other, which has been a fun time to be a part of this team, covering it the last few years and seeing that kind of growth, not only on the floor, but off the floor.
And we talk about the camaraderie of this team so much on this podcast in particular, but also behind the scenes, right? Like, Spence, you do some of the best video work when it comes to putting out social clips of what goes on in the locker room and all those different things. And I feel like fans that get to watch your videos and get to see the behind the scenes on FanDuel and with Serena Winters and all those other things have a better understanding of the love and compassion and the joy that this team is playing with, that just has immersed itself onto the court. And that shows itself in every aspect of their game and also in their competitive spirit. It's not like they're having too much fun to the point where they're allowing teams to come back. And I felt like that was the case, and I think this is the last time that it happened this season, was earlier against the Warriors when they were at home, had a 41-point halftime advantage, and they had 83 points at halftime, and they let them come back a little bit. And I think the game was even closer. I mean, the game ended 136-117. Tonight ended 113-95. So you can tell that even in a game where tonight you felt like it could have been anybody's ball game at any point up until the second half. And then in the first half of the first game, it was like the Cavs were running away with it. And I think you look at Stephen Curry's numbers, and as everybody does, that's what you look to the Warriors' success. The Cavs, over 2 games of playing him this season, have held him to 9 of 24 from the field and 4 of 15 from deep. So you talk about being able to limit one of the premier and arguably the best shooter of all time to under 30% from deep on 15 attempts, right? And then you talk about how Darius Garland is showing himself, and Brad Daugherty said it tonight on the broadcast, as one of the best point guards in the league. And when you see it from the perspective of what we've gotten to do, which is look back to last year, look back to the joyless Darius Garland that was dealing with a fractured jaw, a loss to his family member, all these different things. For you, and to have known Darius for so many years, to see him get the joy back and to see him play to this caliber, what does it remind you of, or does it take you to a different level for seeing Darius being able to play to this level, even potentially better than what he did at his All-Star season?
Yeah, this is better than his All-Star season because of what he's doing defensively and how Kenny is basically playing him like a corner and having him intercept passes in the lane. But he's doing it on ball too. Like you said earlier, the switchability and the way that he's been able to basically try to wall up against small forwards. Like we saw it against Jason Tatum in the Celtics game. We've seen it a couple other times too. Like they are daring him to attack him because they're not going to hide him on defense. That because they know that that's going to be the formula for a lot of teams in the postseason that are going to try and hunt him out. So what are they doing? They're switching on and saying, okay, come take him. And if they get in far enough, then you're kind of basically funneling them to the bigs, or there's going to be help. And then you got to rotate. Like that's a thing too about the Cavs. They've been so on their P's and Q's of rotating defensively and being on a string. It's just so beautiful to watch if you like defensive basketball. With DG, just seeing his attitude though, it's really cool to see. Last year was tough to watch. Just you mentioned it. He was going through the ringer last year. He's not able to eat. He's on the trip to Paris. He's sipping through a straw, personal things going on. And I'm sure that, they always say that players don't read and hear stuff, but you had to have heard that chatter. And I'm sure that was going on around the league too. So like, to see that he's back to this level and that his teammates are uplifting him and have consistently had his back even before this happened, I think is even better. And you're seeing it in the way that he's playing and the emotion he's showing on the floor, as I mentioned earlier, pounding the chest, screaming and expletive one, I should say. And just looking at the crowd, screaming and talking a little bit of a mess, like it's cool. It's cool. And this is a guy that is showing now that he's physical, he's put on weight, and he's taking the challenge every time it's been presented to him.
And I love that you put on the physical approach to him because he's been able to dish and give and take all the different physical force that's been pushed on him because as we saw last year in the postseason, everybody wants to attack Darius Garland. And this year, it's not going that well for them, right? And you talk about on the defensive end being able to hold up against 6'9", 6'10", Jason Tatum. Same thing with Dennis Schroeder and guys tonight. Jonathan Kuminga being another person that tried to attack Darius Garland tonight. And
Wigs.
yes,
Hmm.
Andrew Wiggins loves to play against the Cleveland Cavaliers, especially with the history that they have. Um, and then Darius Garland last season, it felt like on his drives to the basket, he was more so leaning away from the cup rather than attacking the hole and drawing contact and allowing himself, even if he didn't get the foul, to get a better opportunity to split the different spins on the ball that he needed to get better looks. And tonight he had a couple that were just pretty finger rolls up at the lane and getting able to do that.
And going into Draymond's body and
Yes,
just hanging in the air and finishing through contact. That's something that we have not seen in a little while.
yes, and it was much needed to see that. And you talk about the grand scheme of things and how Kenny Atkinson has been able to utilize this entire roster. And Darius Garland, Donovan Mitchell, the core four are great, but then you have the fourth quarter being led by guys like Dean Wade, Sam Merrill, both contributing 5 points in the fourth quarter. And we talked about it again, and I can't harp on it enough because everybody loves to talk about how Dean Wade on the offensive end doesn't contribute as much, had a rough start to the season, especially from the 3-point line. He's starting to pick that stuff up, but Dean Wade for the Cavs is the best defensive rated player. 104.3 is what the Cavs have when Dean Wade is on the floor with them, right? You know what that would rank in the NBA, Spence?
Yeah, I'd say top 5.
Number 2. Number
Woo-wee!
2 in the NBA, just behind the Oklahoma City Thunder, who are at 102.9 for their defensive rating as a team. So when you talk about the impact that Dean Wade makes, and as a small forward, and being able to stretch the floor and all those different things, you talk about that space lineup, that 5-out lineup that Kenny Atkinson has been workshopping and utilizing with this team. Dean Wade, a perfect fit. Spence, we are going to have a tough conversation when Max Strus, Isaac Okoro, and Dean Wade are all healthy. I know this podcast and the listeners of this podcast have their own ideas of who should be in the starting lineup. Who do you think should get the nod when everybody's healthy on this Cavs team?
I'm gonna use a Kenny adage here. It's gonna be matchup based. That's my cop out. I'm gonna go with that one. I, it's tough. It's a tough decision. But here's the thing. This is the good part about the Cavs, and like I said earlier about the sacrifice that they have. Doesn't matter who's in the starting lineup. Who's in the closing lineup probably matters more than who's starting. And it's also dependent on who's playing the 3 for the other team. Are they doing small ball? Are they doing big ball? Is it more of a traditional lineup? Who's on that night on the offensive end? Like, these are all things you have to think about, and it's a great problem to have if you are Kenny Atkinson. But it's going to be tough when Isaac comes back into the fold, figuring out whose minutes decline. Like, and if you look at just the allotment of it, like, yeah, Ty Jerome played a lot tonight, and George played a good amount of minutes, with the foul trouble, but even their minutes have been kind of on the downturn. And same with Sam Merrill, even though he's still in the rotation, the minutes have gone down a little bit the last few games. So that's probably something you keep an eye on. Maybe those kind of take a downturn, but the starters are still having plenty of rest. Dude, they had another white flag game tonight for the Cavs, where the starters got pulled with 4 or 5 minutes left. Can you sustain this? I don't know, but if it continues, then guys are going to be fresh and ready by the time April rolls around.
And I think that's really important, Spence. And you talk about the mid allocation that we talk about a lot on this podcast. Nobody on the Cavs tonight played 30 minutes.
No.
Nobody.
That
The
is insane.
the most that a player played tonight was Darius Garland, 28 and a half, basically, right? Everybody else was 27 and under. And you talk about how that helps out when it comes to being able to get deep into the playoffs, when it comes to being healthy, being ready, being an understanding of even rotation players having confidence and being ready to step into any rotation, any role, whatever. And I like how you framed it about the small forward puzzle, I like to call it. And it's because Kenny Atkinson is so different from how JB Bickerstaff operated last season when it comes to lineups and rotation bases, because every game almost last season, we knew who was starting the fourth quarter, we knew who was closing the fourth quarter, and sometimes that's not necessarily who needed to be on the floor for those matchups. It needed to be based on matchups and who was having a better game, who was having a better strong suit in their defensive matchup, maybe in for scoring, whatever it may be. And we've talked about that again. Jared Allen getting smaller minutes in certain lineups so they can go into that five lineup and allow Evan Mobley to play the five and spread the floor. Or having Jared Allen alongside Evan Mobley so they can deter bigger defenders. And Nikola Jokic is a great example for that. And even into the next couple of games, Dallas Mavericks. What do you do with Daniel Gafford, Derek Lively II? All these different matchups that are going to be difficult for the Cavs, but they have the roster to be able to have that kind of success. And you mentioned Isaac Okoro, and I want to give a little bit of something for our listeners because he was in San Francisco. He's been traveling with the team during this road trip, and he was actually getting work in after shoot around today using a Pilates ball with his injured right shoulder while dribbling with his left hand to allow himself to get extra strength and work in for his AC joint sprain that he is recovering from. It's been around 2 weeks since his injury, but if you want more information on that, you should subscribe to Subtext. That's where you get all our insider information from me, Chris, and Jimmy. But Spencer, I appreciate you coming on and giving us all your insight, all your takes. It was great to have you on. It will not be the last time, but let people know where they can find you before we wrap this up.
No problem, man. Yeah, you can follow me on Twitter. I'm at Spin Davies. That's where you can see all those videos that Ethan was talking about. You can also find those videos on our YouTube page at Cleveland Cavaliers on SI. Please subscribe, rate, comment, do all that good stuff. We've got the post game on lock. We've got our podcast Courtside with Cavs on SI. Just had that drop today. So make sure you do that, and si.com/NBA/Cavaliers. And if I could, I also cover the rest of the league. I know I'm crazy. But I have a lot of features over at RG Media, so that's rg.org. Just did one with Gershon Yabusele. Had a nice game for the Sixers tonight in Portland, so show me a little love there on that one. And then I also do draft feature work for Babcock Hoops. So yeah, if that's not a handful enough, I don't know what is.
And hey, I was gonna say if you didn't plug your exclusives, I would have thrown your name in there. Come on now. So
I
yeah,
appreciate you.
yeah, of course, of course. So yeah, make sure you tune in to Spence, especially his work for other teams around the NBA. He is one of the best, coolest guys that I've gotten to meet while on the beat, and he does great work, video work that you guys will want to tune into. Obviously, cleveland.com still has you on covered with YouTube shorts and different interviews, but it's to a different length when you can go for over a minute with Spence and all this different content that he's got for you over there. But with all that being said, that'll wrap up today's episode of the Wine and Gold Talk podcast. But remember to become a Cavs insider and interact with Chris, me, and Jimmy by subscribing to Subtext. This is where you can send in your questions for this week's episode of Hey Chris. Get those in early because we're going to get into a lot of different things this week, especially as we head into the new year. So to do that, sign up for a 14-day free trial or visit cleveland.com/Cavs and click on the blue bar at the top of the page. If you don't like it, that's fine. All you have to do is text the word STOP. It's easy. But we can tell you that the people who sign up stick around. because this is the best way to get insider coverage on the Cavs from me, Chris, and Jimmy. This isn't just our podcast, it's your podcast. And the only way to have your voice heard is through subtext. Y'all be safe. We out.